Hello everyone, my name is Victor Manibo and I'm a senior attorney here at Wang Law Office. Today you're watching the AM Show, our newest YouTube show.
Hi, my name is Ariel. I'm the host. I'm also a senior paralegal in Wang Law Office. Our show going to start every Friday at 11 a.m. EST, 8 a.m. PST.
The AM Show is here to answer all of your pressing immigration questions. We gather all of these questions from our viewers through email and through YouTube comments and through Line. So if you have immigration related questions, please send them over to us and we'll gather all of them together into one episode and try to answer them one by one. Today's episode, for example, we've gathered all your questions about the Entrepreneur Parole program.
Yes, before we start today's topic, Victor, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. For those who don't know yet, again, my name is Victor Manibo. I'm a senior attorney here at Wang Law Office, and I've been with the firm for over 10 years. I've been a lawyer for 12 years, having graduated from Cardozo School of Law here in New York. My job mostly consists of immigration litigation, meaning helping people to not be removed from the country by ICE, and also immigration applications, meaning helping non-citizens to get legal immigration status here in the US. I also do a little bit of crimmigration, that's criminal law and immigration, where we help immigrants or non-citizens with their criminal cases so that their immigration status remains protected.
Yes, so today's topic is Entrepreneur Parole, right? What is this parole?
So the formal name of this program is the International Entrepreneur Rule, IER, or IEP, the International Entrepreneur Program. This is a program by which DHS exercises its parole power to let some certain international entrepreneurs or business persons to come into the United States and set up their businesses and have kind of some sort of like status that allows them to stay in the country and have their businesses and create jobs for their neighborhoods.
So is this program create a new visa category?
No, so that's why I said it's kind of like status, because it's not really a new visa category. You know, we've talked about before about immigrant visas and non-immigrant visas and how those give you certain privileges, and immigrant visas are more long-term and permanent. That's why it's called lawful permanent residency, and non-immigrant visas are more temporary. IEP, or International Entrepreneur Parole, isn't a type of a non-immigrant visa or immigrant visa. It's just a designation for certain people that says DHS is going to parole these people into the country to let them set up and run their businesses, because those businesses probably are going to create jobs or have some sort of public benefit.
So who's going to be eligible for this IEP?
Well, there are certain requirements to become an international entrepreneur parolee. The first one is you have to have an active and central role in a US-based startup that was created within the last 5 years. So this parole program is really targeted towards new businesses. Some of these are tech businesses, mostly, startups that are trying to provide a new service or a new product. That's why it has to be a new business within the last 5 years. And the person who's applying for parole should be, central to that business, meaning they own the business or they manage the business. They have a high designation and a higher role such that the business can't really operate without them. And that's why they're needed to come in from outside of the US into the US, because if they're not here, then the business won't be able to run. So that's one requirement. So you have to be an international entrepreneur, basically, right? Because that's the parole program. The second requirement is this person has to have at least 10% ownership stake in the startup. So, not every business owner is hands-on on the business, right? There are businesses where somebody just owns it, but they don't have an active and central role. So this is slightly different from the first requirement that I said about the central and active role. You also have to own at least 10% of the business. So the applicant has some stake in the business that's being set up or that has been set up in the United States, right? That's the second requirement. The third requirement is that the business itself should have had a substantial investments from qualified investors or substantial grants from government programs or awards, like important awards given to the business for the type of work that they do. And we're gonna talk about investments, grants, and awards. But basically, this requirement means that the business itself is deemed by other people, by other entities, or by the government as something that's going to be successful, something that's going to provide a benefit, provide jobs, improve the economy. And if somebody's investing in a business or if the government is giving that business money, that's a good sign that the business is viable and for the long term.
So what kind of investment or grant that it can be counted into this kind of pool?
Okay, so we talked about the business has to be, set up within the last 5 years, right? So
in the US, set up in 5 years, and then at least 10% ownership.
Right. But the business also has to show that they have at least one of these three things. Number one, a minimum of 264,147 in qualified investments. Again, that number is 264,147 of qualified investments. And second, you should show, if you don't have the qualified investments, a minimum of 105,659 of qualified government awards or grants. Again, that's 105,659 worth of government awards or grants. Or, if you don't meet, the investment or the awards and grants, maybe you're a little bit short on either one of them, you may still qualify for IEP if within the last 18 months, you can show that there is evidence that your business is going to be providing a lot of jobs and going to be rapidly growing. You have to show evidence that this kind of business, for example, tech businesses or any kind of businesses, has a product or service that is rapidly growing and that your business is the type of business that will be providing and creating new jobs.
Yes. So let's go step by step.
Mm-hmm.
What is qualified investment?
Right. So for something to be a qualified investment, it has to be lawfully derived capital. So money from legal sources, from legal operations, from legal businesses. That's one requirement. Obviously, the money can't come from unlawful activities. The second is it has to be made, the investment has to be made within 18 months prior to filing the IEP application. And third, it has to be from a qualified investor. Now, what is a qualified investor? A qualified investor could either be a person or a corporation. Some companies invest in other companies, right? Sometimes a person invests in a company. So a qualified investor is either a person, an individual who is a US citizen or an LPR, or a corporation, an organization that is legally owned and operated in the United States and is majority owned and controlled by US citizens or LPRs. So the requirement here is kind of easy to remember, as long as it's US citizen or LPR. If it's a corporation, as long as it's in the US and majority owned and controlled by US citizens or LPRs.
So this a question. So many people are going to ask, can I find my US citizen relative to be the investor?
Well, that's kind of tricky because you can't just ask your relatives hey, give me some money, put it in my business, right? This is the IEP program is intended to encourage investments from investors that regularly invest in companies. So, you might have heard of what's called venture capitalists. These are businessmen whose job it is to just invest money in various companies so that they can get some rewards from it, right? So yeah, you can get your relative, but you have to show that your relative isn't giving you money just because they're related to you. You have to show that this relative regularly invests and is investing in your company because this is what they do on a regular basis, okay? And also, the startup entities that your relative is investing in, USCIS is also going to look into that. Like, did your relative invest in other startups that have a good potential for growth and job creation? Or is your relative just like lending money to like all of these other relatives? Okay. Again, we have to keep the goals of the program in mind. So with the goals of like job creation and rapid growth, USCIS wants to make sure that when your relative is giving you money, they are a regular investor in startups, and they're investing in startups that really have the potential for improving the economy.
Yes, we just talked about investor, right? How about the government grants or award that you just mentioned? What are they?
So government grants and awards are, like I mentioned earlier, basically free money when the federal or state or local government gives a business money with no expectation of anything else in return. It's not like a government contract where like, maybe the federal government gives you money so that you provide them with like products or services. That's not a grant. That's not an award, because you have to give something back to the government in return, right? So a grant or an award is money where the federal, local, or state government gives it to the business. And usually they do this for economic development, like I said, to help a certain particular area or neighborhood, or to help certain businesses just continue to operate. Like I said, during the pandemic, we saw a lot of government grants. Sometimes the government also does it for research and development. The government gives money to businesses to encourage certain types of corporations to continue research. For example, they give grants for pharmaceutical corporations to help find cures for certain diseases, things like that. Sometimes the government gives grants or awards to certain businesses so that they can hire more people, especially in certain areas. And if those are the goals of the government grant, if that's the reason why the government is giving this business money or awarding this business money, then that qualifies as a qualifying grant or award from the government. Again, it has to be made within 18 months before filing the IEP application, and it has to be the federal, state, or local government. Foreign governments, even though for example, the home country or any other country that's not the U.S. Gives grants to your business, that does not count.
So you mentioned 2 requirements, right? What if I just meet part of the requirement? What to do?
Right. And again, this is kind of a recap from before, right? Maybe you only meet part of the investment and also part of the grant money from the government. You can still qualify for IEP as someone who's working for a business if you show that within 18 months prior to filing your IEP application, there is substantial proof that the business is going to have rapid growth and will be creating a lot of jobs in the near future. Now, what that kind of evidence is depends on the kind of business that you have. If, like I was saying earlier, certain tech companies see a lot of rapid growth when there's a lot of like a big demand for a certain product or service. It's not easy to predict what will be like a job or a business that's going to create a lot of jobs or will rapidly grow, but that's going to come from economic indicators, that's going to come from business reports, that's going to come from even like business plans that the IEP applicant and the business can prepare and submit with USCIS.
Yes. So how can I exactly apply for this IEP?
Okay, so let's say that you are involved in a business and you are an international entrepreneur, and that you are central to the operation of that business and you own at least 10% of the business, right? And then you can also show that you have gotten qualified investments and qualifying grants. Now you're trying to apply for IEP so that you can come into the United States to run the business, or stay in the United States if you're already in here, because either way you can get IEP if you're out of the country or in the US. Let's say you've lined all of the requirements up. How do you actually apply? First thing you do is you have to file a form. Because this is USCIS, there is always a form. It's the I-941. You have to fill out that form. You have to pay the filing fee of like $1,200. There's also biometrics fees, and you have to file the supporting documentary evidence.
So what kind of supporting document that we need to file?
The supporting documents is kind of the same as any other USCIS application. They have to show that you meet the eligibility requirements. Let's talk about those one by one. You have to show supporting documents that you have a central and active role in the business. So that's going to come from internal business documents that show, oh, you're the CEO, or like, this is your job title. This is probably going to come from the articles of incorporation or the organizational chart. It's probably going to come from the tax returns of the business, the operating agreements. So each business has these kind of common documents that show which people do what and what their roles are. And if you provide that with USCIS, and if those documents show, oh, this person is really like high up in the business and does a lot of the work, then that's going to show a central and active role, which is one of the first requirements.
So someone signing for the document.
Exactly. Yeah. If you're the one, I mean, not just owning 10%, but running the business, you're really essential to the business. That's what matters. Okay. A second is you have to show proof that there are investments that are qualified and government grants that are qualified, and those can come in the form of like stock certificates or checks that are given or issued to you by the federal, state, or local government. Not to you, but to the business. Issued to the business by federal, state, and local governments. These huge transactions, we're talking about big numbers here, 250,000 or 100,000. There are documents that memorialize these, and if you provide those to USCIS, like I said, stock certificates or proofs of like funds transfers from like the government, and awards usually come with a certificate. You provide those to USCIS together with your package to prove that you have those qualifying investments or grants. And third, you have to show that there's going to be a public benefit to your business. Your business is going to serve the public, the economy, by creating a needed service, a needed product, and creating jobs. So the proof here comes in the form of business plans. Maybe it also comes from, again, reports, industry reports. One of the requirements here is it's a new business, right? So if it's a new business that has a lot of buzz, has a lot of interest, has a lot of hype from customers, right? There's going to be probably media coverage on that, or like reports from internal industry insiders. Those can be used to support that, like, oh, this is a good business. The public really need this service, need this product, or like this is really going to create jobs. You include that in your IAP to show that there's going to be a significant public benefit because of your business.
Yes. So there's only one person can apply. Can they add the family member into this program?
Yeah. No. Well, let me correct you first. Like, for every business, it's not just one person is the IAP. Each business can support 3 people to get an IAP parole. So that's first, right? A business is not a one-person operation. There are one-person operations.
At least 10% is going to be more.
Yeah. So for certain startups, they can support up to 3 people as long as they all have an active and central role, as long as they also own at least 10%, etc. Each of them have to qualify and meet all the criteria, but up to 3. But moving on to your question, what about the family members of these applicants? Can they get the same status, or what status do they get? Well, the spouses and minor children, meaning unmarried and under 21 years of age, of applicants are also eligible for parole under IEP. So if you're an applicant, you have a spouse, and you have minor children, if you're granted IEP, they basically get the same parole. They get the same privileges of IEP as you.
So does those family members need to file a separate application or provide a separate document?
Yes, you have to provide, or you have to fill out a form I-131 for your spouse and children. So it's not the same form. It's not the I-941. It's the 131 for them. And you also have to provide proof of your relationship. So your marriage certificate and the children's birth certificate. And you have to file that with your 941.
So people often ask, can my family member of this parole can work in the US? Maybe not in the same startup company, maybe other company?
The spouses of international entrepreneur parolees can apply for employment authorization, yes.
So how long is this IEP going to be approved?
Okay, so let's say you finished your application. The forms have been filled out. You collected the supporting documents. You have an attorney who is experienced and knowledgeable in this very kind of application, who prepared it and reviewed it with you, and you submitted it, and then USCIS approves it. What happens now, right? So this kind of depends if you're in the United States or outside of the United States. But either way, regardless of where you are, if your IEP is granted, you're granted a total of 5 years to basically enter and be in the United States, or stay in the US if you're already in the US, without fear of being removed, and you're allowed to work and stay here and run the business, because that is the purpose, right? That's why they're paroling you in. That's why they're letting you in and letting you stay here to run that business. You have 5 years for that.
So when the USCIS initially grant, I'm going to get 5 years?
No. So you initially get 2.5 years, and then you have to kind of reapply for parole again after the 2.5 year marks. So if you reapply and that gets approved, you get another 2.5 years for a total of 5 years.
So under what kind of situation I can apply for this IEP? What if I'm currently maybe a B visa or F1 visa? Can I apply for this?
So for a lot of folks who are already in the United States, that maybe they're here on a tourist or business visa like B1, B2, or they're here on a student visa, like the F visa, like you were saying, they're wondering, I want to have a startup here. Maybe they came in here to do a few business transactions, and they realized, I want to build a business in the United States. Maybe they're studying and they said, now that I'm graduating, I want to launch a business from the knowledge that I gained from my education. They can apply for international entrepreneur parole. If you're currently in the United States and you have non-immigrant visa, not just a B or F, you can apply for IEP.
So what if I got a visa before, but why not I overstayed it? Can I apply for IEP?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a problem, because we talk about this a lot. If you overstay your visa, you get unlawful presence, and unlawful presence brings a lot of complications. It means that you might be disallowed from entering the United States for a certain period of time, 3 years, 10 years, depending on the situation. And this is something that you might encounter if you are an overstay and then you apply for IEP. If you're here in the United States and you're an overstay and you apply for IEP, even if it's approved, you're still going to have to depart the United States to be paroled back in. So let's go back to what IEP is. The P means parole. So they have to admit you, let you in. So you have to leave and then come back. And you can't come back easily if you have unlawful presence. You will be barred. Just know that if you are an overstay and you want to get IEP, it is possible. You might have to do extra steps, and it is a little bit more difficult. So if you're in this situation, you have to consult with a lawyer who knows what they're doing, who has experience with these kinds of things, like running law office.
Yeah, otherwise you might be barred from that 3 or 10 year bar that cannot return. So what if we talk about the situation that the people in the US, right? What if the person that I am not in the US, I'm outside of the US, can I get IEP?
Yes. So you still file the same kind of form. It's the form I-941. It's still, submitted to USCIS with all the same documentation, right? All the proof that we talked about earlier. And then when USCIS approves it, it's it's called a conditional approval because you, as someone who is outside the United States, still have to go through the embassy or the consulate. You still have to go through the embassy or the consulate for an interview. They still have to screen you. And then when you pass that interview, that's when you can get basically your full IEP. It's not conditional anymore. And then you can enter the United States.
So what if I already have IEP at the moment? Can I leave and re-enter?
Yeah, you're generally supposed to stay here and run your business, right? You can get advanced parole to leave for business trips outside of the United States, but generally you stay here for your initial period of 2.5 years. If you leave, you get another 2.5 years, whenever that is. So ideally, you would not be leaving the United States, or if you're leaving the United States, you're getting advanced parole first, so that the U.S. doesn't consider your initial 2.5 years to be over.
How about if I already have the IEP? Can I change to another status, another maybe immigrant or non-immigrant status without leaving the U.S.?
Generally, the answer is yes. Let's say you are IEP, you want to apply for a green card. If you meet the eligibility requirements for a green card, sure, you can apply for that. Maybe you have a family member who's a U.S. citizen or an LPR who can petition for you, for example. Or maybe you have another business who is willing to sponsor you and file for an employment-based green card for you. If you meet all the other requirements for an immigrant visa or even a non-immigrant visa, yes, you can apply for that if you have international entrepreneur parole. Usually the problem, though, is, let's say you are here on IEP, it doesn't mean that you have been admitted into the country. It's still parole. It's kind of like we're giving you a free pass because you're building a startup here in the United States, right? It's not lawful admission under the immigration laws, and lawful admission is a requirement for our immigrant visas. So that's a complication that can be surpassed in very, very many ways, but there is no straightforward answer to this. It's just important to note that parole is not admission, so you might have to leave the United States and come back if you're applying for an immigrant visa. If you don't want to do that, or you cannot leave, there are ways to go around it, but it's just too complicated on a case-to-case basis. And if you're in this situation, again, consult with someone who is experienced, who's dealt with this. We certainly have, and we will help you through it.
Yes, and IEP is a parole that allows you to work in the U.S. regarding your status. If you think that you might meet the requirement that we just mentioned earlier, you can call us to schedule an appointment to consult to see if you can do it. Yep. So today, time is up. And then if you have more questions, you can feel free to leave your question with any of our platform.
Right. We encourage everyone to keep sending questions. We get a lot of really interesting questions about very many topics. And again, we try to do this show as a public service. However, whatever I tell you is not legal advice. It's not specific to anyone's case, and it's certainly not legal representation. It doesn't mean that me or Wang Law Office represents you through this show. But if you want legal advice, if you want legal advice specific to your case, if you want legal representation by someone who is experienced in IEP or any other field of immigration law, we encourage you to reach out to us through our platforms. Again, you can YouTube, you can Line, you can email us, you can call us.
Yes, and you can also continue follow us on YouTube. And thank you. See you next time.
Bye.